No power grid. No fuel truck. No supermarket run. Just a farm that has fed the same family for 5 generations using nothing but soil, wood, and knowledge passed down by hand. That's the lost wisdom behind 12 self-sufficient living secrets still practiced in Amish communities today. This isn't survivalist content built around bunkers and stockpiles. It's the Amish way of doing things. Homestead skills refined over 2 centuries of real Amish farming, covering gardening, food preservation, and natural building methods that quietly outlast anything plugged into a wall. Stick around for the one that turns a barrel of ash and a bucket of leftover fat into something every household needs. Number 1. The 3 Sisters Garden. Plant these 3 together and the garden starts feeding itself. You kneel in a garden bed where 3 plants grow tangled together on purpose. Corn stalks rise like green columns. Bean vines spiral up around them. Squash leaves sprawl low across the soil, wide as dinner plates. This is the 3 Sisters method, a gardening technique at the heart of self-sufficient living. 3 crops planted together so each one does a job the others can't. Corn gives beans a pole to climb, skipping the cost of trestling. Beans pull nitrogen from the air and feed it straight into the soil the corn needs. Squash leaves shade the ground, smothering weeds and locking in moisture, cutting how often you need water. Plant corn first and let it reach about 6 inches before adding beans. Then tuck squash in around the base once the beans start climbing. This spacing avoids one crop choking out another and is the exact layout Amish households still use in their kitchen gardens today, passed down by memory rather than instructions. Space the corn mounds roughly 3 feet apart in each direction, since crowding them tighter starves the roots and leaves you with thin, undersized ears by harvest. Pole beans do better here than bush varieties since they need the height to actually climb, rather than sprawl across the squash below and smother it. A garden built this way rarely needs a single trip to the store for fertilizer because the plants are already trading nutrients back and forth all season long. Number 2. The root cellar. This refrigerator has never once needed a plug. You climb down a short set of wooden stairs into cool, dark air that smells like damp earth and stored apples. The temperature here never changes much, no matter what the thermometer says outside. A root cellar is a dugout space that uses the earth itself as insulation, holding a steady 32 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. Potatoes, carrots, beets, and onions get packed into bins of damp sand, which draws off excess moisture and keeps rot from spreading. Apples get wrapped individually in newspaper since one spoiled fruit will ruin the ones beside it if left uncovered. Sort by what spoils fastest and store it closest to the door, so nothing at the back gets forgotten until it's gone bad. Done right, a single root cellar lets a family eat from their own garden clear through to spring. No electricity required at any point. It's one of the simplest homestead skills a family can learn and one of the most valuable. Onions and garlic actually prefer a drier corner of the cellar rather than the damp sand bins, since too much moisture around them invites mold instead of preventing it. So a small shelf near the entrance where air moves more freely works better. A thermometer left hanging near the door costs almost nothing and tells you in seconds whether the space needs a vent opened or closed as outside temperatures swing through the season. Families who check their cellar weekly, pulling anything showing soft spots before it spreads, routinely stretch a single fall harvest all the way into the first weeks of planting the next one. Number 3. Canning and fermenting the harvest. What doesn't get eaten in July gets sealed away for January. You walk into a kitchen lined floor to ceiling with glass jars, hundreds of them, each one catching the light in a different shade of red, green, and gold. Canning turns a few weeks of ripe produce into a full year of food, sealed airtight in sterilized jars, processed in boiling water or a pressure canner. Sealed correctly, those jars sit safely on a shelf for over a year. Fermentation works alongside it. Cabbage packed with salt turns into sauerkraut in a stoneware crock. And cucumbers turn sour and crisp using nothing but salt, water, and thyme. No vinegar or heat needed. Process high-acid foods like tomatoes and pickles in a boiling water bath, but low-acid vegetables need a pressure canner to kill off bacteria safely. a distinction that matters more than any recipe detail. An Amish household might fill several hundred jars in one season, a shared effort where mothers, daughters, and neighbors work side by side so no harvest goes to waste. Food preservation like this is one of the oldest forms of self-sufficient living, older than the jars themselves. A jar that fails to seal, meaning the lid doesn't pop down and stay down within a day of processing, should go straight into the refrigerator and get eaten within the week rather than trusted on the shelf. For fermenting, a clean stone or a water-filled bag laid on top of a cabbage keeps everything submerged under its own brine, since anything poking above the liquid is what invites mold to take hold. Most households build their canning schedule around whatever ripens fastest. Tomatoes first, then beans, then whatever fruit the orchard drops last. So nothing sits picked and waiting too long before it hits the jar. Number 4. Timber framing and the barn raising. By the time the sun sets, a field that was empty at dawn has a barn standing on it. You stand in a field at dawn as wagons roll in from every direction, until nearly 100 men have gathered in one place. Timber framing is a natural building method that joins large wooden beams using hand-cut mortise and tenon joints instead of nails or screws, which lets the whole structure flex slightly under wind and snow load rather than snapping under it. Wall sections called bents get assembled flat on the ground first. Then the entire community lifts each one into place using rope, muscle, and coordinated shouting. No crane involved. No blueprint runs this operation. Master builders carry the measurements and joinery in memory, taught to them the same way their own fathers taught them, which is why the work moves fast without anyone stopping to check a plan. This kind of large-scale cooperative building is Amish farming culture at its clearest. Proof that being self-sufficient was never meant to mean being alone. Each bent has to be lifted at almost the same moment as the ones beside it, since a frame left leaning half-raised overnight can twist under its own weight before the roof ties it all together. Experienced crews assign one man per rope with a foreman calling the count, because a single missed pull can send a 20-foot wall section swinging in a direction nobody wants it to go. Families on the receiving end of a barn raising are expected to return the favor when a neighbor's turn comes, which is really the whole system in one sentence. Everyone eventually needs the barn, only many hands can build. Number 5. Rainwater cisterns and hand pumps. When the power fails, this well keeps working anyway. You place your hand on a cold iron pump handle and push down. Nothing happens on the first stroke. On the second, water begins to gurgle up from somewhere deep below the ground, cold and clear. Rainwater gets channeled from barn and house roofs into large underground cisterns, sometimes holding thousands of gallons, filtered and stored for washing, livestock, and irrigation. For drinking water, a hand pump connected to a drilled well needs nothing but physical effort to bring water to the surface. No motor, no grid connection. This kind of Amish farming infrastructure was built to last a century, not a warranty period. A simple mesh screen over the roof gutter keeps leaves and debris out of the cistern before storage, a small step that prevents most contamination problems before they start. Some communities that allow limited technology add windmills to pump automatically, but the most traditional households still rely on nothing but an arm and a well-placed lever. The first several gallons off a roof after a dry spell should get diverted away from the cistern entirely, since that initial runoff carries the dust, bird droppings, and debris that build up while the roof sat dry. And letting it wash past before switching the flow into storage keeps the whole tank cleaner for months. A pump left unused through a hard freeze needs its water drained back down the pipe before temperatures drop. Otherwise, ice sitting in the cylinder can crack it clean through by morning. Families who maintain their own pump leather, replacing the worn seal inside the cylinder every few years, rarely see a season where the handle fails them right when they need it most. Number 6. Rotational grazing. The secret to grass that never dies out isn't watering it more. It's leaving it alone at the right time. You watch a herd of dairy cows move slowly through a gate into a fresh green paddock, grass untouched and knee-high. Rotational grazing divides pasture into smaller sections and moves animals from one to the next before they can overgraze any single area. giving grazed land 2 to 4 weeks to recover depending on the season. Amish farmers manage this with simple portable fencing rather than large permanent pasture. And the manure animals leave behind fertilizes the next section naturally as they move on. Move the herd every 1 to 3 days rather than waiting until grass looks stripped, since pasture that's already bare takes far longer to bounce back than pasture moved just in time. This single habit builds healthier, more nutrient-dense grass over years without a single bag of synthetic fertilizer. One of the quieter homestead skills that pays off slowly and steadily. A good rule most farmers follow by eye rather than measurement is to move the herd once the grass has been grazed down to about half its original height, never lower, since grazing past that point forces the plant to burn root reserves just to recover, instead of simply regrowing leaf. Portable electric fencing, powered off a small solar charger in communities that permit it, makes subdividing a large field into rotation paddocks a job that takes an afternoon rather than a season of post-digging. Over several years, farms that stick to strict rotation report pastures that stay green through stretches of dry weather that would leave a continuously grazed field bare and dusty. Number 7. Beekeeping. An orchard's entire harvest can come down to whether this one box survives the winter. You lean close to a wooden hive box and hear it before you see it. A low, steady hum vibrating through the wood itself. A single strong hive can pollinate several acres of blossoms in a day, often deciding whether an orchard's entire season succeeds or falls short. Amish beekeepers use traditional Langstroth hives with removable frames, checked by hand, and a few puffs from a hand-pumped smoker calm the bees just long enough to work safely by interrupting their alarm signals. Beyond the honey itself, which gets used in cooking, preserving, and candle making, a healthy hive needs surprisingly little upkeep. Just a seasonal check and enough stored honey left behind for the bees to survive winter on. That small trade, a bit of surplus honey for a full season of pollination, is one of the best returns any self-sufficient living setup can offer. Opening a hive on a cool or overcast day rather than a warm sunny afternoon keeps far more bees calm inside the box instead of out foraging and quick to defend it. A timing trick experienced keepers rely on more than any protective gear. Leaving at least 60 pounds of honey in the hive going into fall, rather than harvesting every last frame, is usually the difference between a colony that survives winter and one that starves before spring flowers return. A hive placed near an orchard rather than at the far edge of a property does noticeably more pollination work, simply because the bees don't have to fly as far to reach the blossoms. Number 8. Heating with wood. This house has been warm for 6 months straight without a single utility bill. You stack another split log into the firebox and feel heat roll off the iron in waves. Outside, snow is falling sideways. Wood-burning stoves remain the primary heat source in most Amish homes, fueled by trees harvested straight from a farm's own woodlot, a practice as old as Amish farming itself. Wood needs to season or dry out for 6 months to 2 years before it burns clean and efficient, so cutting and splitting happens well ahead of the season it's meant to heat. Harvest selectively rather than clear-cutting a section all at once, since a well-managed woodlot keeps producing fuel for decades instead of running out in a few winters. Cast iron cook stoves do double duty here too, heating the home while also handling the day's cooking on the same fire. Hardwoods like oak, hickory, and maple burn longer and hotter than softwoods, such as pine, which makes them worth setting aside specifically for overnight burns when nobody's awake to feed the fire. Splitting logs down to roughly 4 to 6 inches across, rather than leaving them thick, cuts the seasoning time noticeably because more surface area is exposed to open air. Families who stack a full winter's wood under a simple roof rather than tarping it directly find their wood burns cleaner, since trapped moisture under a tarp can actually slow seasoning instead of speeding it along. Number 9. Draft horse farming. Diesel prices have never once slowed this farm down. You feel the ground shift slightly under your boots as a team of massive horses leans into their harness, pulling a plow through dark soil in a long, even furrow. Draft horses, like Belgians and Percherons, were bred specifically for the strength and calm temperament needed to pull loads many times their own body weight for hours at a stretch, doing the job of a tractor without a drop of diesel. A well-trained team can plow roughly 2 acres in a single working day, a homestead skill that has powered Amish farming since long before the tractor existed. Training takes years, not because the work is complicated, but because a farmer has to learn to read a horse's posture and breathing, the way a mechanic reads a gauge, adjusting pace before a problem ever shows. That investment in time pays off in a farm that stays running no matter what fuel prices do. Young horses usually start on light groundwork, hauling an empty cart or dragging a harrow, well before they've ever hitched to a loaded plow. Since asking too much too soon teaches a horse to resist the harness instead of trust it. A team needs regular rest breaks through a long day in the field, roughly 10 minutes for every hour of steady pulling. Or fatigue starts showing up as uneven furrows and a horse leaning harder than it should on its teammate. Unlike a tractor sitting idle in an off-season, a horse still needs feed, water, and daily attention 12 months a year. A trade-off Amish farmers accept because the animal also reproduces, works for decades, and never needs a replacement part shipped from a factory. Number 10. Herbal medicine gardens. For a lot of Amish households, the nearest pharmacy is a flower bed by the back door. You crouch beside a small patch tucked near the kitchen door, distinct from the vegetable rows, planted with leaves and flowers instead of food. Plants like comfrey, plantain, yarrow, and echinacea get grown deliberately, each tied to a specific remedy. Comfrey for bruises and sprains, yarrow for closing a wound, and echinacea for fighting off a cold. Harvest just before flowering, when medicinal compounds are most concentrated. Then dry and store in labeled jars so the right remedy is easy to find months later. These gardens are kept with the same seriousness as food crops, because in a household far from a pharmacy, they often serve the same purpose. Serious illness still goes to a doctor, but everyday ailments get handled first with a poultice or a tea, using knowledge that never needed a textbook to survive this long. It's one of the gentler homestead skills, more patience than labor. Plantain, often dismissed as a stubborn lawn weed, is one of the most reached for plants in these gardens precisely because it grows almost anywhere without effort. Crushed fresh and pressed directly onto a bee sting or small cut to ease the sting of it. Herbs get hung upside down in small bundles in a dark, airy space to dry, since direct sunlight breaks down the same compounds that make them useful in the first place. Every jar in the cabinet gets labeled with the harvest year as well as the plant name, since most dried herbs lose real potency after about a year and are better composted and replaced than relied on past their prime. Number 11. Soap making from lye and ash. Somewhere between the fire pit and the compost heap, this household found its soap. You watch a woman pour pale liquid slowly into a large kettle set over an open fire, stirring with a long wooden paddle as the mixture thickens from something like water into something like soap. Lye gets made at home by running rainwater slowly through hardwood ash packed in a barrel, a process called leaching that pulls out the potassium hydroxide needed to react with fat. Rendered animal fat, called tallow, gets combined with that lye solution and cooked over steady heat until saponification turns both into a hard cleansing bar, one of the more overlooked homestead skills still practiced today. Let the finished bars cure for 4 to 6 weeks before use, since soap straight out of the mold is still too harsh and hasn't finished hardening. Dried herbs or lavender get added to household soap for scent, while plainer batches are set aside for laundry, turning two things most kitchens throw away into something the whole house needs. Hardwood ash from oak or maple makes far stronger lye than ash from softwoods like pine, which is why households are careful about which woods end up in the leaching barrel rather than tossing in whatever the stove happened to burn that week. A simple test older soap makers relied on before any modern measuring tool existed was floating a fresh egg in the lye water, since lye strong enough to make good soap will hold the egg just at the surface rather than letting it sink. Bars cut too early, before that 4 to 6 week cure finishes, will still work but dissolve fast and irritate skin. So, patience at this last step matters as much as getting the ratio of fat to lye right in the first place. Number 12. Seed saving and heirloom varieties. That tomato didn't come from a store. It came from last year's tomato, and the year before that. You hold a dried seed pod between your fingers, cracking it open to reveal a dozen small seeds inside. Each one a direct descendant of a plant grown on this same land 100 years ago. Rather than buying new seed each year, families select the healthiest, most productive plants from every harvest and save their seeds, preserving heirloom varieties of tomatoes, beans, and squash found almost nowhere else. Dry seeds thoroughly before storing them in paper envelopes or glass jars. Kept somewhere cool and dark, and most stay viable for 3 to 10 years depending on the species. Choose open pollinated varieties specifically, since their seeds reliably grow the same plant year after year, unlike many hybrids whose seeds won't breed true. Over generations, this selective saving lets plants adapt to a farm's own soil and climate, often outperforming anything bought from a catalog. It might be the single most foundational of all homestead skills on this list, since every other one depends on it. Squash and other cross-pollinating crops need to be spaced well apart from different varieties of the same species, or grown one variety at a time in a given season, since bees moving between them will mix the traits and produce something unpredictable next year rather than a true copy of the parent plant. Tomato seeds specifically benefit from a short fermentation step, left in their own pulp and water for a few days before rinsing and drying, which strips away a natural germinating inhibitor coating the seed and improves how well it sprouts the following spring. A labeled envelope noting the variety name and harvest year, tucked into a jar with a bit of powdered milk to absorb moisture, is the entire storage system most of these seed banks have ever needed. Somewhere right now, a jar is sealing itself shut on a shelf. A hive is finishing its last rounds before dusk. And a root cellar is holding its temperature exactly where it needs to be, all without anyone checking a screen or flipping a switch. 12 practices, one idea underneath all of them. Self-sufficient living was never about isolation. It was about knowledge that outlasts whatever comes and goes around it. That's the real lesson hiding inside Amish farming, gardening, and homestead skills alike. Wisdom built to survive its own culture, if anyone still bothers to learn it. Which of these could you actually build in your own backyard? This is Stellar Eureka, signing off.